operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to take a look at the Gators' upcoming matchup against the Georgia Bulldogs in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Of course, it is always an interesting rivalry weekend. Yeah. And so, just all sorts of fun if you've ever been. Big tailgating scene, the stadium split in half orange and blue, half red and black. Obviously a big game. Gators having lost 2 of 8, or having won only 2 of 8 against Kirby Smart, and 0-2 in the last 2 games under Billy Napier, and the 2 games have not been particularly close. Last year, score on the first drive and then don't score again until the garbage time, essentially, and score on the last 2 drives to make the game look a little bit closer. But with that said, it's a new year. Definitely new teams on both sides of the ball. Georgia losing a lot of their receiving threats from last year. Florida, of course, DJ Lagway taking over the quarterback position with a new dynamic of the downfield passing game that he brings a little bit more accuracy and arm strength there than Graham Mertz. Also throw in a little bit more depth and experience along Florida's receiving core and offensive line. Of course, we'll get into talking about that, as well as Florida's defense. We've got all the questions about, are they legitimate? Are they not? And then, of course, what are we looking at against the Bulldogs? Of course, if you have not, be sure to check out the opposing sideline brought on Trey from the Doghouse podcast on our YouTube page for those listening on any podcast service. Or if you follow us on YouTube, definitely check that out. Again, our opposing sideline with Trey from Doghouse podcast. Check that out. We're going to reference it a little just in case you've not gotten a chance to listen or will not, but definitely had lots of good intel for the Bulldogs going into this game. And so I'll also say ahead of time, I have not looked at the Gators injury report yet because at the time of this recording, it has not been released. So I will be going based on what I have heard through the grapevine. As we know, sometimes the grapevine is accurate. Sometimes the grapevine is not. Of course, sometimes you say, give Trey Wilson the ball early and often, and then he's out for the game, as I did earlier this year. But, you smile and nod, and we have lots of fun. With that said, before we get into it, let's give a shout out to my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company. If you are in the Central Florida area and you want to have any lawn projects that you need done, maybe you still have stuff from Hurricane Milton or Helene that just needs to get fixed up, give my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company a call or even shoot them a text for a free quote at 407-490-2617. You can also shoot them an email at alvarezlawncompany@gmail.com. Once again, if you're in the Central Florida area, you need some lawn work done, give my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company a call or text for a free quote at 407-490-2617. You can also contact them at alvarezlawncompany@gmail.com. Alvarez Lawn Company, building plans that work for you. With that said, let's talk a little bit about the offense because, as I talked about in the intro, the offense is a little bit different this year. Some of that is just new dynamics with some of the new playmakers that the Gators have brought in, and that could be all the difference. Let's start and not bury the headline on this one. DJ Lagway, very, very big game for him to come in. Good news is, unlike Anthony Richardson a few years ago, whose first start was against a very good Georgia team, I'm not sure this Georgia team is quite as good, but also this isn't DJ Lagway's first start. He is a true freshman. It is a big game, and he's perhaps facing the best defensive coach in the game in Kirby Smart. With that said, having that experience already, both starting the Samford game, starting the Kentucky game, and then playing in all the rest of the games, including A&M, Mississippi State, and finishing out the Tennessee game, that experience is valuable now as he heads to Jacksonville. And of course, with him, you have a receiving core of Elijah Badger, who's averaging 23.8 yards per reception. Kamir DK, 20 yards per reception. Two guys that were not with the Gators last year, of course. Eugene Wilson, if healthy, is also a major threat last year. First drive of the game got him the ball early and often, and the Gators went down for a touchdown. And then they kind of went back on how many touches he seemed to be getting, and the offense seemed to go down with that. But we'll see also weapons in Boardingham, Hansen, several other guys. Aiden Mizell, of course, as he comes back from injury, got a little bit of play against Kentucky. Would love to see more. Of course, we remember how great he looked in that Mississippi State game. And then running backs, and we'll get to the defensive side of the ball, and of course that big Georgia running back storyline that we have. But Montrell Johnson, if he's able to go, a solid experience back. If he's not, Jaden Ball, 5 touchdowns against Kentucky. Granted, some of those were 5-yard touchdowns, but we've seen him break some big runs this year. He averages 4.9 yards per carry. And he's only going to get better. True freshman, getting more experience, figuring out what he can do, what he can't do with the speed of the college game, and improving like that. Always good things to see. Jacoby Jackson as well has done some great running. 28 carries on the year, 5.5 yards per carry. So obviously that is something that we want to see, is getting that run game going. And as I've said for years, you want to see that run game going, but to do that, you've got to be willing to take shots and also complete some shots to back out the safeties, spread out that box a little so we don't have defenses cheating 8-9 guys in the box, especially since we run a lot of 12 personnel. Again, for people that don't know what 12 personnel is, and I know listeners probably have heard it and then others may not, but just explain 12 personnel. That is 1 running back, 2 tight ends in a set. And when you run 12 personnel, if everyone's in tight, that does cause tight boxes. And generally, I'm not the biggest fan of running out of that, because if you've got 7 guys on your line of scrimmage plus your quarterback and running back, that equals 9 potential defenders in the box. But with that said, we've done pretty good. And if you can help some of those 9 defenders be safeties who are now deeper off the line of scrimmage because you've hit deep passes, that will help open up the passing game. And with that said, the first key to this game, and this also stems from Trey coming on the opposing sideline, is we've got to take some shots early, and we've got to complete a few of those, and not just really deep passes, but again, stuff that is 15, 20 yards down the field. Trey talked about the weakness of this defense really might be the secondary and the pass defense. And so we need to attack that. We need to take advantage. When Georgia played Mississippi State, that was shortly after we have played Mississippi State. And of course, in that game, their quarterback gets injured, and Van Buren, their talented freshman, comes in, does well for Mississippi State pretty much the rest of the game. Well, then a few weeks later, he's playing Georgia, and what's he do? 20 of 37, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. And again, that is Michael Van Buren for Mississippi State, with Mississippi State talent around him, a true freshman. And if he can do that, there's no reason to believe that at least the potential for a DJ Lagway is there to have a similar or at least a very successful game. The question is, how will Billy Napier call this game? Will he call it so we do take some shots early, maybe back off some pass rush, or will he call it very conservative, running the ball, just hoping to, run clock and keep it close? I'm not sure. But the fact is, we've already seen that. Now, the Georgia defense, something that needs to be said is only twice this year have Georgia opponents gone over the 15-point mark. The first one was their loss to Alabama, where they gave up 41 points. The other one is to Texas, Texas, they only give up 15. I'm sorry. The second one is that Mississippi State game I referenced, where they allowed 31 points to the Bulldogs. And so this defense generally a stickler. However, a few teams that I would say are solid teams, well, Mississippi State, despite their record, I believe is pretty solid. Once Jeff Lebby gets a few more classes in, I think they're going to be a decently dangerous middle of the pack SEC team. Obviously, situation there isn't there now, but I mean, they've put a scare in Georgia, scoring 31 points. They gave Texas A&M a few weeks ago a hard time, and at times gave us a hard time. So it's easy to say, well, it's Mississippi State, but seeing that this team put 31 points up on Georgia, you would hope Florida can as well. That said, Kirby Smart's had 2 weeks to game plan, and like I said earlier, one of the best defensive coaches in the game. He's going to be ready to have what he thinks is the best game plan to stop DJ Lagway in the Florida offense. That doesn't mean it's a perfect game plan. He may not account for something like he did in 2020. 2020, we talk about how the wheel routes all of a sudden became open and we exploited them throughout the first half. And so it'll be up to the Florida coaching staff to see, okay, in this game plan, what has Kirby Smart left out? What's he not accounting for? And now let's attack it and let's abuse it and then use that going forward. If we try and wait until we establish the run, I'm not sure if it goes really well for us. As, Clemson had a problem. Kentucky, their offense is bad, but they had a problem. Auburn had some problems. Texas, of course, benched their quarterback in that game. And I'd rather see us just say, hey, it's a rivalry game. Billy Napier's still coaching for his job. It's the Bourbon Bowl. Don't hold anything back. And so just go out there. And that the first key is take some shots, get some big plays in the passing game. But I'd say the second is don't coach scared. And a good example of that, let's go back to 2022, Florida, Georgia. Less than 2 minutes, about maybe less than 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes, something like that left in the first half. Billy Napier decides, hey, I can run out the clock by running the ball 3 times. Didn't count for Kirby Smart having 3 timeouts. Kirby Smart takes 3 timeouts. Florida has the ball on their own 10. What does Florida do? Punt. What does Georgia do? Score before the end of the half, another touchdown. So you got to try. Don't play not to lose. And I guess you could summarize the second key is don't play not to lose. Play as if there's nothing to lose and play to win. You're not being expected to win. The line on this game is 16.5 less I saw. Go out there with nothing to lose and go for broke. We've seen weird things in these games before. 10 years ago, 2014, no one expected Florida and Will Muschamp to come in and get his first win over Georgia. And then next thing you know, Florida's running for like 300 yards. Treon Harris only throwing 6 passes the entire game. And somehow Florida comes out with a blowout victory in that one. And so weird things happen in this game. I talked about, I believe is when I went on Trey's podcast, talked about that 2007 game where I remember College Game Day flippantly saying, yeah, Florida's in Tim Tebow's hometown. Florida's going to beat Georgia, and didn't even really review it. Well, what happened? Well, giant celebration. Georgia somehow upsets Florida that year. And just I bring that up to say funny things happen in this game if you go out there with the intent to win instead of playing not to lose. I'm not worried about being safe. I'm worried about trying to win the game, trying to take advantage of Georgia's weakness in the passing game to open up the rest of the offense. And of course, the third one is just play smart. Like don't overthink it. And what I mean by that is you've got a 240-pound quarterback. If you got 4th and an inch, let him go get the inch under center. Take that sneak. Funny enough, Lane Kiffin last week, I believe it was last weekend, does a jet sweep on a 4th and short, just like we had done against Tennessee. I thought it was a bad call against Tennessee. I thought Lane Kiffin's team, whether it was him or Charlie Weiss Jr., whoever called that, I thought was a terrible call there. Both weren't successful. Don't overthink it. Just pick up the yards. And also, when I say coach smart, don't overthink it, I'm also talking about third downs. Don't throw it short of the sticks. Don't call routes short of the sticks. Don't be running 4th down screens, things we've seen a lot of tendencies from this offense. Don't do that. Try and secure the next set of downs. And if not, feel okay punting, but don't take the chance to get it because you never know. It's easy to have low risk, but with that comes low reward. Take some high risk, high reward type plays. Yeah, throwing down the field 10 yards is a lot more dangerous than it is throwing behind the line. But also you get a first down a lot more than you do if you're throwing it behind the line. So coach smart, again, passing plays. Number 1, 2, don't coach scared. And 3, just be smart. Don't overthink yourself. Before we get to the defense, I do want to give my friends at Gator Chatter a shout out. All sorts of fun talk over there. Gator Chatter is a Florida Gator message board owned and operated by Gator fans and not really attached to any news organization like a Gator Country and On 3 24/7, anything like that. Owned and operated by fans for the fans. And there's already a Florida Georgia game chat going on. Definitely check that out, as well as all the other fun, including some discussion of that awful Dwayne Wade statue reveal that happened earlier this week. And so go there, have some fun. Check out GatorChatter.com, your Florida Gator sports bar. And so let's talk about a little bit about the Gators defense matching up against the Georgia Bulldogs offense. Georgia's offense has been overall pretty good this year. Outside of a rough game at Kentucky, they've scored 30 plus points in every single game. Didn't matter if it was in Tuscaloosa, didn't matter if it was in Austin. They went and they scored at least 30 points a game, with Kentucky being the lone game. And before I sit here and say, well, Kentucky held them to 12, we should be able to do that, I count every game as different, because I remember when Georgia lost to a bad South Carolina team in 2019. And of course, 2 weeks later, we're losing to that Georgia team. So I'm not going to play the transitive property game. With that said, we're really going to see whether this defense has improved or not just by the fact that they have scored 30 points a game, whether it was Clemson or Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, or Texas. The only cupcake that they've played so far is Tennessee Tech. Kind of about how the only real cupcake we've played so far was Samford, although you could argue UCF staring down a possible losing season, could be the equivalent of maybe an Auburn game. I say that, but Auburn went and beat Kentucky this week, so who knows? But with that said, talking to Trey from Doghouse Podcast, believe is on the opposing sideline, talked about Carson Beck at times has gotten into issues where he's thrown multiple picks. And if he's going to throw multiple picks, I mean, against not A&M, against the Longhorns, Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions. If Florida can get him throwing erratically into 3 interceptions, I think it gives the Gators a good chance to win this game. Of course, that's if the offense is holding up their side. Last year, the defense did get some stops or held Georgia to some field goals, and when they did, the offense got 0 points in the first half and early third quarter. And you gotta score when your defense takes care of you. And I think if they can get pressure, which we've got the talent to, then you got Beck throwing a little bit erratically, 3 interceptions. You never know. You could have a Devin Moore taking a pick back for a pick 6 or down to the 1 like he did against Kentucky. And that greatly would increase the Gators' chances of walking away with the win. So the first thing the defense needs to do is get the pressure on Beck, force him into bad situations. Our pass rush has been hit and miss at times. Sometimes we're still allowing quick plays, which don't allow our pass rush to get there, but we've been a little bit better. And there are times we've had great pass rush. For example, there's a drive that Tennessee had where we had 3 straight sacks. If that type of production shows up, Florida's got a great chance in Jacksonville of pulling the upset. So it'll be very interesting to see what defense shows up. With that, the second thing I'd say is, and this goes with probably one of the biggest storylines, is you've got to slow down Trevor Etienne. Trevor Etienne, former Gator, went to the Georgia Bulldogs in the offseason. Obviously, not much love there from Gator Nation to Trevor Etienne. He did miss the opening game against Clemson due to suspension stemming from a DUI in the offseason. With that said, Etienne's been averaging 5.1 yards per carry, has 7 touchdowns on the year. And again, outside of that Tennessee Tech game, these are teams that overall are pretty good, whether it is Texas or Alabama. Okay, Auburn isn't too great. Kentucky, Mississippi State, obviously. But still, 5.1 yards per carry is pretty impressive. You got to fill those gaps. You got to be gap sound. You got to maintain the edge. And if you can do that, then you've got a chance. Can't let Trevor Etienne catch a ball and run with it on you either. I mean, we saw that. We saw in Gainesville. Currently, he's got 20 catches for 130 yards, so only 6.5 yards per catch for the Bulldogs. However, could I see Kirby Smart trying to find ways to really rub salt in the wounds by getting Etienne some scores? I could totally see that, because Kirby Smart, as a person that comes out and is a Georgia grad, was a player during the Spurrier years, didn't really get to experience the taste of victory over the Gators. This is a game he takes personally. This is a game that is big. There's, as of the time of this recording, there's rumors coming out that he's having a Gator commit flip to Georgia during Florida Georgia week. I mean, this is a guy who completely wants to beat Florida on and off the field, and it would be great to know that our coaching staff is the same. And I say that because I can see him trying to do that with Etienne. I joked around with Trey, I believe is off air, about I could see if there is garbage time like last year, instead of Gunnar Stockton come in, I could see Jaden Rashada coming in and getting some plays again, just for the shock factor, kind of like the Urban Meyer timeouts back in 2008. Do I think that's going to happen? No, not necessarily, but just the type of mindset I see from Kirby Smart and what he feels about this rivalry. This is his circled game on the year every year. And so, of course, the big defensive key, get Beck pressured and throwing erratically, slow down ETN, and then just be aggressive on defense. Again, we are underdogs. Georgia's favored by 16.5 points. At some point, you're going to have to try and win the game. And whether that's being aggressive with a blitz, playing tight man coverage, whatever it is, take care of it, wrap up on tackling, but play to win the game while playing smart. There are many times we've seen in the past years where the Gators constantly line up 10 yards off the ball. Well, if they do that, the quick passes are open there, and Georgia's got the athletes that can turn those 5-yard routes into 15-yard gains. So man up on your guys, play well, play how you're supposed to, but that doesn't mean don't play aggressive. We've seen some great plays this year with diving tip passes. We've seen some great picks. Obviously had 3 pretty good picks against Kentucky, had a great pick before the half against Tennessee, and generally just seeing the evolution of that defense and hopefully showing that the defense that we've seen in the middle part of the season, the middle 3 games, is more of a result of improvement and evolution on this defense and less of the offenses they face. And this game, along with the next 3, are going to tell the tale on that. UCF didn't look particularly good this past week. Kentucky definitely didn't look good. Tennessee, I think, is averaging 21.5 points per game in SEC play. So this is a Georgia offense that has scored 30 points in every single game, with the exception of that week 3 game in Lexington. Go ahead, slow this down. Show us that you're the real deal. We've got players talking like this is big. We have people saying, hey, these players really want it. Again, I hope that they wanted every game this season. But if you want to show that you're the real deal, you want to show that your coaches needs to be here longer, you go out and you play this game competitively. Hopefully you win, but you keep it competitive for 4 quarters, and we'll see how it goes. With that said, I don't pick against the Gators on here. I'm open about that. I do think that with Carson back, and I said this to Trey, I said it on Opposing Sideline, I definitely said it on my guest spot on his podcast, and that's, I think the Gators have opportunities to get turnovers here. Carson back, I mean, maybe we don't get the 3 picks that he got against Texas, but it doesn't take 3 picks sometimes to change the game. I think it was 2001 or 2003. I'm going to say that it's going to end up being like 2002. But Gus Scott gets a pick for the Gators near halftime, and what's he do? He has a big return. Pretty sure it was a pick 6. Totally changes that game. And I think if the Gators can get the pressure on Beck and isn't allowing ETN to carve them up, I think there's a chance that we see a big-time pick from a guy like Devin Moore. I don't know if Jason Marshall is playing. I've heard that there's a chance he's done for the year. And if that's the case, maybe Cormani McClain shows off those ball skills that made him one of the top recruits in the nation 2 years ago. We saw that pick 6 against Kentucky. If he were to do that against Carson Beck and Georgia, that could totally just change the trajectory of the season, change the trajectory of this game. And that's really what a lot of people want to see, is Florida come out with a victory. Right now, Billy Napier is 1-9 against rivals. Can't really can't really blame people for not wanting to get to 1-10. But with that said, I think there's a chance that we get one or two game-changing turnovers and DJ Lagway taking advantage of one of the weaker secondaries Georgia's had in the last 5-10 years. And I think there's a path here. I'll give the same prediction I gave on Doghouse Pod, and that is 27-24 Florida with the upset. And I believe it can happen. We'll just see if it does. With that said, thank you all for listening. And you know what's next. And always, go Gators.